Hello everybody, what is up? Cobra Axis and Allies here, bringing you a quick painted review for today. This is, as you saw from the title, my Manchukuo forces for Global War 1936. Now, I decided to revise some of these guys. I had painted them before, and I think I made a video in the past talking about them. But basically, I wanted to try a new way of playing this expansion. Now, as many of you know, the Manchukuo state, basically, in Global War 1936, when you're playing with the expansion, they just act as Japanese forces. You know, they collect for Japan, like in terms of IPCs. All their forces are basically just reskins of Japanese pieces, and they just allow the Japanese player to build a couple of different things. But what I've decided to do is treat it like a Commonwealth, and I'll be testing this out in my next game over the summer, which will basically kind of set it like Anzac or Canada, where they'll collect for their own money, they'll purchase their own units. They'll be completely aligned to Japan, move on Japan's turn, but other than that, they'll be kind of like a Commonwealth nation. So yeah, let's get into just the painted review for this. So of course, I think I've shown off in my last video, I've got these homemade roundels that I've made for pretty much every single nation in the game, and they're not beautiful, but you know, they were great at the time because of their cost efficiency. So, getting into the units, I think my favorite thing are these infantry that I painted up. These are various different sets of infantry from, I think these guys with the hats are actually North Korean soldiers that I picked up a while ago, but they look very nice. And then also with these guys, making for pretty convincing kind of Japanese uniformed Manchurian soldiers, whereas they're actually Korean War American soldiers, so a great use of repurposing parts. I'll just kind of grab all these guys to show them off. So, more just regular infantry. I always like having lots of different sculpts. I really like how these guys don't have one of the same sculpt either. So, or I guess they might have two. And then also I painted up some of these guys. Now, you can see they have a different uniform. What they're supposed to represent is like Thai soldiers. So basically, just because Manchuria is like a smaller state within Japan, or like a client state, I just decided why not throw in some Thai soldiers just to, you know, have their uniforms out there and everything. So another officer kind of guy, and then finally this pretty cool looking dude aiming his rifle. And then we've just got a few more of like the kind of Thai pattern troopers in the green. And these are 172 Soviets in winter uniform. So yeah, a nice use of repurposing units. Now I'm just going to move the box aside just so that we can kind of show off the whole collection of units here. So next up we have got the Navy. Now, out of box, they don't start with the Navy, but what I've decided to do was, in the sea zone that borders Manchuria, Japan has, I think, a transport, a coastal sub, a destroyer, and possibly a cruiser. But going off of history, I've decided to add or replace the Japanese coastal sub and destroyer with a Manchurian coastal sub and destroyer. So here you can see, we've got the coastal sub and the destroyer, and now I've just noticed that I've marked this with a gray tip, whereas it is actually supposed to be a blue tip for destroyer. But yeah, so, and this is a 3D printed piece from my World War I game. Going on to the Air Force, now in the beginning of the game, another addition that I made was that I have here and there, like I really haven't added them as a full-on unit that, you know, a lot of nations have, but I've added biplanes. Now, they're basically really crappy fighters. I think they are like attack at a 4 and a 4, and they only fly like 2 spaces, so they can only attack like bordering territories. And I think right now, starting setup 1936, Manchuria gets one, and then the two sides of the Spanish Civil War, I replaced their fighters with these biplane fighters. But yeah. So they start with one of these, and you can see we've got, you know, nice white camouflage. I like the white on this because, you know, it looks different from Japan, especially, but you can definitely tell them apart on the board. And then the other air unit that I've added, I think the last thing that I've actually added to the setup is a transport, because during the war, Manchuria actually had, I forget what it was actually called, I think it was something like the Manchurian Air Service or Air Transport Service. And basically their kind of civilian craft that they had during peacetime were used to great effect in transporting men and material for the Japanese war effort. So this gets added in the beginning, and I've played this with adding these 2 air units for the past few games that I played, and I really like the addition of them. They're not super overpowered by any standard, but they kind of help add some playability for Japan. Now here is a Japanese bomber. Now I forget the actual type, and it's a medium bomber that I painted up. Now basically what I did was I took the Dutch Fokker-Wulf plane, or bomber, and then I shaved down. You can see kind of like the crappy cutting that I did there. It was a pretty good plastic, so it was a little difficult to shave down. But now it looks like a type of Japanese bomber, and I forget the name of it. But I really like this thing. The roundels came out kind of crappy, but they get the point across. And of course, I really like the kind of the art style of this with the black and the yellow. And then of course, I always like my planes with the cockpit details nowadays. It really adds some great detail to the aircraft. So yeah. And of course, all the planes are magnetized. Okay, then we've got the tactical bomber. Now this is just a American tactical bomber. I just kind of, spare part, so I might as well just throw it in case they decide to build one. You can see that some of them have these black splotches on the sides, like all the planes have that, and that's because, I don't know what it said, but it seemed like all the Manchurian planes had a lot of text on the side of them. They probably had to do with like the numbering, maybe even just saying like Manchurian Air Service. But yeah, and I really like the cockpit detail in this thing. And it definitely looks like a Japanese early war tactical bomber that they might have used. And then lastly, again, in terms of Japanese planes that I don't know the names of, this is another one that I kind of custom built out of a American P-40 by taking the engines off, because technically the engine would be right there in the back. And yeah, this is just the Manchurian fighter. Just something a little, I could have just made them zeros, but I decided to go for this kind of odd-looking Japanese plane that was in the Manchurian Air Service. So in case they decide to build some fighters, they've got some cool custom units to put on the board. And then we have got, I guess real quick, we'll show off the last few infantry. This is the Manchurian Royal Guard. They start with one of these and they can't be built. They're basically just a elite infantry, their attack and defense are boosted by 1. So definitely in all the games I've played, these guys are really awesome. I always keep them till the end of the game because they are a great infantry piece to have, especially when you get some artillery and even a commander. Like this guy can be almost overpowered, but yeah. And then lastly for infantry, we've got these guys. Now, they're just kind of KMT sculpts that I painted up, and they're supposed to represent the Kwangtung Army, which is a special piece. Basically, they're regular infantry, but Japan can build 4 of them during the game, and they don't have to be built at factories. They can just be built within Manchuria. And then we've got militia. This is just a historical board gaming sculpt that I painted up and put on a militia base. We've got cavalry, just some Risk cavalry. And then for vehicles, I quite like their vehicles. Now here we've got, it's a lot of repurposed Japanese equipment. So here we've just got the normal Japanese medium tank painted up in Manchurian colors. A half-track, again, Japan, that has just been repainted for Manchuria. Let's see, we've got a tank destroyer with the roundel on the back of this thing. I really like the Japanese tank destroyer and self-propelled artillery here. And yeah, they look pretty nice in this color scheme. We've got their light tank, just a Polish 7 TP, something like that. Yeah. And of course, they don't have a ton of stuff because I think they only make 4 IPCs, so they don't have a huge amount of money to spend. So you're not going to see a ton of stuff being built by the Manchurians, but they do start with a decent amount of things. I think they start with a motorized infantry to go with their forces, so yeah. And then we've got a armored car. It's another 3D printed piece from my 1914 game, a German armored car. another light tank, another mechanized infantry. This is a I forget what the name of it. A universal carrier. It's a British type of vehicle, and again, this is 3D printed by me. I printed out, I think, a few of these, but this was the only one I actually painted up because, as you can see, it doesn't look beautiful, but I definitely like it. I really like how this guy's files that I found online have the infantry inside, so you can see the little guys sitting in there. And then lastly, we've got a artillery piece. So yeah. But as you can see here, we've got the full-on Manchurian army. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and comment down below on what armies you would like for me to review in the future. Because as you all know, my Global 36 game is all painted, and I don't really have a lot of great videos showing off those pieces. So yeah, be sure to subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you guys again. Cobra, out.